listening to Radio OwlsNest. The songs of Martin Page, all day, all night, forever. So grab a cup of tea, settle down with us in the Owl's Nest. So, this is episode 4, and we're going to try something a little bit different today. I'm going to do my first show with a guest. It's going to be an interview today, and we just hope that that guest today turns up. Well, who could that be? Perfect timing. Who's that ringing the bell at Radio OwlsNest today? Well, he happens to be a very good friend of mine, an amazing musician. He's worked with me for many years, seems to have survived, but we'll ask him about that. Maybe he hasn't. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to a superb drummer, Trevor Thornton. Hello, Trevor.
Well, hello, Martin. It's lovely to be here.
Well, that's the kind of thing I've told you to say.
Well, I'm reading from the script that you handed me when I walked in.
Yes, you're very well rehearsed. Now, Trevor is the most amazing drummer in the world. He's worked with me from day one, right from the beginning.
That's right at the beginning.
Okay, so now, getting into all seriousness, I'm going to tell about the history of Trevor very quickly. He was in Q-Phil. He was also in the incredible band Asia for 2 years. He worked with Kim Wilde. Well, she had that huge career in England. And he was in a band called One Nation with Kipper.
Kipper, that's right, yeah.
He was the Sting guy, right?
Yeah, he went on to produce and play with Sting, yeah.
And you were in that heavy English rock band, very successful, Saxon.
I was a Saxon boy.
How did you survive that?
I'm not sure I actually did.
No, you did not survive that, did you?
I am actually quite damaged from that experience, yeah.
So Trevor's going to stay with me through this hour show. We'll be stopping and playing a few tracks in between, and Trevor's actually played on about 45 of my songs, and you'll be hearing some bits of that. It's really great.
All at the same time?
All at the same time, in stereo. It sounds better if you do that. But I want to ask Trevor some questions here, and I've got my first question is, when did you first start playing drums?
When I was about 7, a wee young nipper at 7.
And what made you want to play drums at 7 years old? I mean, I was thinking about playing football and kicking a ball around.
I copied everything my elder brother did, and he started taking drum lessons at school, and then he basically didn't keep it up. He stopped, but I followed him into practicing drums. But I stuck with it. You know, I actually got a big kick out of hitting things with sticks.
Did your parents, give you a drum kit early on?
No. I was using the old pots and pans, the old phone books.
Yeah.
And I would sit and watch Top of the Pops.
Yeah, I did
and
too.
mimic the drummers on TV. It was quite a shock, actually, when I got my first drum kit and I realised there was a thing called a bass drum pedal. I didn't know how to use that to start with. But that, I didn't get to my first drum kit until I was about 13.
And did you always want to be a drummer?
Only when I started. I'll tell you what really got me going is my brother took me to see Deep Purple. It was at the old Sundown, which was the Brixton Astoria. I think it's now called the Academy.
Yeah.
But Deep Purple played there, and he'd just bought the Machine Head album by Deep Purple.
And that's one of your favourites still, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, Ian Pace is the reason I play the drums.
Wow.
And so I was like really young. I might have been only 9 or 10 years old. We went to see Deep Purple. And he did his drum solo. I managed to get my way down to the front there, and
wow.
the vibe and the feel of his drums, and his drum solo made me cry emotionally because it was it just sounded incredible.
And you were down the front, right?
Right. I worked my way all the way down the front. He took the solo. And it was just incredible. I could feel the power from his kick drum on my face.
Yeah.
And I knew at that moment, it's like, that is what I am going to do. Wow. I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing that because that is amazing.
That's a brilliant story because you felt it more than anything else.
Oh yeah. I was really quite moved. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great lead-in to play a new song that Trevor's been working with me on. It's a brand new song called Sink Into Me.
Like a wave on the ocean,
So that's a brand new song and unfinished. A lot of the pieces you're going to hear that Trevor's played on are unfinished pieces, but I thought it would be nice to let you hear the amazing stuff he's been doing with me recently. And Trev, all your influences, I mean, so many people influenced you, right? And I also know from working with you for such a bloody long time is that John Bonham's a big influence, right?
Oh, yeah,
Led Zeppelin man.
Yeah. Well, obviously, to start with, it was all the English.
You're a hard rock boy, it sounds, at this point.
My roots are in that kind of thing. I was a rock drummer to start with. Well, because, I liked playing things hard,
loud,
but loud. So I used to like practice The Who, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, all those early English rock bands.
Well, how the hell did you end up with Martin Page and Q Feel?
It was just.
Were you looking for work or something?
Well, I was just that was through my struggling time. I was struggling.
The dark period.
Yeah, the dark period.
I've got to say here though, is that you are one of those drummers, Trev, that can play so many different styles. I know my history when I went into London. We joined a band, both you and I, called the Charlie Mullen Band, right?
Yeah.
Now, there was a lot of soul music and pop music, although there was a little bit of heaviness, like Thin Lizzy we liked. But I remember thinking you were an all-rounder. You could play so many different styles, ballad, reggae, right across to an easygoing song to an all-out rocker, and jazz. So how did you develop from that hard rock, the loud Led Zeppelins and the Black Sabbaths? What made you also develop into, like, in a way, a session drummer?
Well, I discovered this country called America, and then I realised there were a lot of other drummers in the world other than those English rock drummers.
Yeah.
And I discovered, like, the world of jazz and the session players. So I discovered, like, Jeff Porcaro, Steve Gadd, Billy Cobham, and all these amazing other drummers.
The elite.
Yes, yeah. That just opened my eyes to, a whole new world of drumming. So then, I'd pretty much got all these English drummers down. I had mimicked them and practiced them.
And would that have been, the Keith Moons? And,
Keith Moons, John Bonhams, Ian Paces.
But not Ringo.
But not Ringo, no.
We'll talk about that a little bit later on.
Yeah, all right then, okay, yeah. Bless him. Anyway, so then I discovered all these great American drummers, so I started to learn and try and mimic those guys and practice to what they played. Mm-hmm. And so, obviously that developed my chops quite a bit because they was playing a lot of very sophisticated kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And I got to say here, I learned from records, buying vinyl records and 45s and putting the old needle onto the disc and playing along with it. So did you learn from records when you were practicing, listening to Steve Gadd, listening to Jeff Porcaro, Toto? How did you learn?
That's really all you could do, either cassettes or records. And the funny thing is, unlike today when you can get a program or an app and slow things down, you had to get a record, and what you do is fiddle it so you could, like, put your thumb on the turntable.
Can't believe we did that.
Right, and you'd slow it down to figure out a groove or something, or you just had to listen to it. It was very hard, but you got the idea what they were doing.
What a way to train.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So you were buying records? You were
yeah.
You were a collector like me, right?
Absolutely. I had quite a vast record collection, yeah.
Well, what a good time to play another brand new song. I'm actually working on this now, so it's just a phonetic guide vocal. But Trevor's been doing an amazing drum arrangement on it, and it's a song called May I Walk in Beauty.
It hurts my love to be there in the brightening of the day, when all the lights have fallen down, I have lost my way, and crowded down my skin, and I don't know where to turn for all the lights that beckon me. Well, how I'll ever learn my Lord and bread and wine. May I walk in beauty like a peaceful warrior, make my heart be strong and true. May I walk peaceful warrior who make my heart be strong and true. May I walk in beauty, and all the days that haunted me and drive my heart to stone, I try to brown it bitterly, but all I do is fall down to my feet. May I walk in beauty like a peaceful warrior until my heart is strong and true. May I walk in beauty like a peaceful warrior who make my heart be strong and true. May I walk.
Well, that's a new song that we're working on now, so it's just a guide vocal, and I'm finding my way through it. You're hearing a real rough of that Trevor's helping me with a terrific kind of Simon and Garfunkel, kind of Bridge Over Troubled Water kind of drum thing. What do you think, Trev? Yes, he's nodding. That's called May I Walk in Beauty. So let me just tell you the history here, because it's my show. It's not Trevor's, it's my show.
Oh,
so it's really
beg your pardon.
It's really all about me. So
right.
I came into London and I was looking for bands to play with, and went for a few auditions. And I joined a band called the Charlie Mullen Band. This is a band that I think will go down in infamy and history. And there was this young drummer. He was the youngest player in the band. We were all veterans, and that was Trevor. He was the baby of the band. And what about this Charlie Mullen Band, Trev? Tell me about it.
He was quite a character.
Yeah, he was, wasn't he?
Yeah. So Charlie was this, guy. He was like half musician, half businessman.
Yes.
But a bit of an entrepreneur. Really fancied himself.
Maybe a con man. Maybe.
There was a bit of con man in there. Yeah. Yeah, like when you say what is he doing now? I think it's 10 to 15 in Leavenworth. Yeah. But
I keep on going on the internet to find him.
Yeah,
but I end up going towards police reports to go. Well, maybe that's the place I'll find him.
I know,
because there is a story, isn't there? We toured with him for a while in London, did these really big gigs, and with
we played all the top shows in London. It was amazing.
Was it Hope and Anchor, the Venue, all these, the Nashville, all
the
these
Dingwalls?
Yeah.
The Music Machine. We played the Marquee.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, and he had this money somehow. It was like
he got backing from some guys.
A consortium was paying, and we were all being paid quite good wages.
And then he rented a house in North London, a huge house,
where I had a room up at the top of the
right. And you lived in that house with him. Yeah. And they'd have all sorts of comings and goings of record people and like producers.
Well, we actually thought this is very professional.
Oh
this is going to happen.
I think the money had something to do with that.
Yeah, it did. And I remember that we did about 6 really, really big gigs. Then it started to collapse, although you and I, Trevor, stayed very close to each other. And I met Brian Fairweather.
Right.
So this is really where Q-Feel came from.
Well, because he was auditioning guitarists.
That's right.
I mean, the funny thing is, he was actually auditioning drummers too.
That's right.
Even though I was the drummer.
Yeah, it's ridiculous,
band.
Wasn't it? And I think we used your drum kit for auditions, didn't we?
So when there wasn't a drummer to audition, just a guitarist, I would play the drums and Martin would be on bass, and we had Dave Fisher on keyboards.
That's right, Liverpudlian keyboard.
Yeah, right, great. And I would play the drums, and then when a drummer came along to audition,
Bizarre.
I would step to one side, and it was like, But the funny thing is, I ended up staying in the gig, I guess.
Well, what it was, Trevor, and I'll say this now, we had about 20, we advertised in this thing, which you do in the papers in England when you're a musician, the Melody Maker.
Yep.
And Charlie Mullen had made me the sort of band leader, so I put this ad out, and we had about 40 guitarists arrive from all over the world, and yes, Brian Fairweather came down from Scotland and became my partner in Q4, and Trevor was our drummer then, but we said, let's do auditions with everybody else. We had 40 drummers come through, nobody was as good as Trevor, and so we had to say, Trevor, get back on your kit. You are the drummer of the Charlie Mullen Band.
Right, yeah. Stay on the drums.
It's your kit.
Yeah.
You should be sat there. Now,
Yeah,
right.
right.
We have to remember Trevor was very young in that band to us, and it was. I suppose we all think like, okay, we're going to find somebody else of our age group, but Trevor just outshone everybody. But that was the beginning, really, of the Q-Phil, because I met with you, Charlie. We'll go back to that again. The strange thing about Charlie is we believe that when that band broke up, Charlie went to prison. I think there's rumours that he conned some politicians out of
He conned the wrong
millions.
people, yeah.
So I remember coming to LA. This is an interesting story because after you've worked with Charlie, you sort of go on a run a little bit and you don't really want to be found by him for some peculiar reason. He hunted each musician down and we joined his band, and then we thought, this is pretty intense. So I came to LA with Brian. We were working with Earth, Wind and Fire, and Charlie called through to our management company, and we thought, oh my God, he's found us. He's found us. And he was just calling to congratulate us. But then we heard that he went into Wormwood Scrubs, I believe. Now, Wormwood Scrubs is a well-known prison in
Very
England.
famous English prison.
And he may still well be there.
In London, yes. Right.
So that was the beginning of us, but getting on to brighter things.
I just want to point out a little bit of trivia here regarding the Charlie Mullen Band. Do you remember when we did those shows, we had a sax player? Do you remember?
I do, and his name was Mel
Collins. And he was a very famous sax player. He was playing with Kokomo at the time.
Oh, and I loved Kokomo.
Yeah.
Now you've jogged my brain, yes.
Yeah, and I remember he came down for the first rehearsal and he wasn't sure what... And after the rehearsal, he said, I brought the cheque in my back pocket. I weren't sure if I was going to have to tear it up or not. But
that says it all.
But I just thought,
No, that's true, because we were playing the venue and suddenly we had this star sax player who'd never rehearsed with us before, but there he was put up there, and we all nodded at him, and as a bass player I was thought, that's Mel, what's his second name?
Mel Collins.
And he played with Roxy Music, and I loved Kokomo because it's one of those English funk bands, had great session players. Right. And I think he played 6 gigs with us, and he just sort of smiled at me like, I'll be glad to get out of this. And I was nodding at him and he was playing little solos.
Oh, yeah, little bits and pieces.
And he was just smiling, and I thought he's probably smiling because the amount of money he's being paid, we aren't.
And I think it just added a little credibility to the band to have someone famous in the band.
It did. I think he was quite happy to escape after 6 gigs.
Yes, I think so.
You brought my mind back to that. Here's a new track that I'm working on with Trevor, with the working title of Animus Anima, male, female. We were talking about Brand X and experimental music, and Trevor jumped on this sort of Japan backing track I've got, and just listen to how Trev funks this. That's a track we're working on. Pure Rough you're hearing there. Early days. At the moment it's got a working title of Animus Anima, and we were, Trevor and I, just talking about when Phil Collins joined Brand X, and we were talking about Trevor's work with Asia and all the progressive music, and I was feeling like, as I was developing this track, I wanted to express myself in that kind of landscape, and Trevor jumped on it. We're trying to, actually, me, Brian and Trevor, maybe do some more work for the Q-Phil thing, because we're still alive. Unbelievable, we're still alive. And it's taken us back to all those memories when we first got together back in the old days. But they were really formative years, because we were. I was playing live with Trevor then, and I bring this up now, that in those days, rhythm sections were really, really important. And I remember thinking, as a bass player, it's not that now, is it, with Pro Tools, everybody working in their bedrooms, but a bass player had to be able to link well with the drummer. That was what was really important in records and in live bands. You used to look at the rhythm section and say, that's a great rhythm section, like the Average White Band. And I remember really playing with Trevor and really concentrating on just that unit, wasn't it? That just the bass player and the drummer had to really be tight, right?
Well, working with you and Brian the way we did so closely set me up for everything I did after that, rehearsal-wise, because you were quite a hard taskmaster in that you would set up like, okay, we're going to work around the chorus now, and we're just going to cycle the chorus.
Yeah.
And we'd go over and over and over.
I was a bastard.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you were a nice-looking bastard.
I was a nice bastard.
Yeah, you were, as bastards go.
Yeah, it's true.
But, I mean, the thing is, every gig I ever did after that was almost easy, because no one worked sections like you did, but it meant when we played or when we recorded something, it was so tight, so together.
I take that as a huge compliment, Trevor. But I remember, I think our fans remember here, "Dancing in Heaven," the first song that really brought me over to America and was my ticket to working here. Trevor played, excuse me, about to burp from the tea. Trevor played live drums on that "Dancing in Heaven." You wouldn't really think it when you listen to that track, because we were highly synchronized, and it was a very fast, high-tech record, and we made a 12-inch on the spot. So you're playing for 6 minutes, and Trevor just nailed that down. And I think I can remember going to Trevor's house, as we used to do in those days, and spend a whole day with him talking about every bloody beat on that song.
Right.
And but then we came in the studio, Mike Shipley, we engineered it, and I remember in those days, we'd say, "No fills, Trevor. Do not stay on the beat. Just stay. Bushka, bushka." It's a dance record. Do not do any fills. Do not show off. But if you listen to the end of "Dancing in Heaven," only on the 12-inch, we do this. We do this horn thing, which I think I was following from Earth, Wind and Fire. But Trevor had to wait something like 5 minutes before he goes, "Ba-da, ba-da." And he's reading. And there's another
250 bars later. Yeah.
You can still remember that, right?
Yeah.
But Trevor writes everything down, and this is a good point to bring this up. This is a drummer that writes everything down, scores it down, right, Trev?
Oh, yeah. I just found it was very useful to be able to make a roadmap of the track and then put any figures or grooves into that.
Yeah.
And then, more often than not, once you record it for the first time, there's a couple of little changes, and rather than try and remember exactly what it is, there's a little change here, we want a little skip there or a little break there, you just like write it into the chart so you can go in and pretty much play it with the changes the next time.
Well, it's to me, all the drummers I've played with, and I will say here that I really feel very fortunate, because over my career, as a rhythm man, I've been able to have my songs played by drummers that I used to absolutely adore as a kid. So I've had John Robinson, Rufus and Quincy Jones. He played on Maurice White's album. Jeff Porcaro played on a Paul Young album I did. Vinnie Cavalluta played on another track with Paul Young. Manu Cachet played on Fallen Angel when I was working. So I had this luxury of just and Jimmy Copley played on House of Stone and Light, and he was Tears for Fears. And,
Phil Collins?
Thank you, Trev. Phil Collins played on that album as well. So I sort of had this wonderful luxury of being, some of the players I grew up loving were playing on some of the songs I wrote. And I have to say now that they were all much better than Trevor.
That's not really saying a lot, though, is it? I mean, I mean, I
I
grew
thought
up
you'd
listening.
appreciate it. I'm being honest.
I grew up listening to those guys too. I mean, they were all big heroes of mine.
No, I got to, why I bring that up is that Trevor's recently been working with me in the last 2 years. I mean, it's a dream, really. Trevor lives around the corner from me. Can you believe Q-Phil all lives in the same area in America? I mean, it's ridiculous. We're all in here, Burbank, Encino, in California. But Trevor has been working on like about 40 to 50 songs of my new work and on one of my new albums. And I've got to say, as we were working, I said, you're my drummer. I mean, Trevor is just an incredible songwriter's drummer as well, and I found that with the drummers we're talking about there. Trevor thinks about the song. I mean, it's a dream for a songwriter, but isn't that the way that you've always seen it, Trev, for drummers?
Well, I don't see it any other way. I mean, I feel there's a certain part for a song, and I work it out. I figure out. I don't just come up with and play the first thing that comes to mind. I want to try different things out. And I know there's a certain rhythm or pattern that works for each song.
Well, that's a perfect intro, Trev, into a new song that I'm building up at this point. And all the songs we're hearing are rough off the board because we haven't finished them and I'm working on them now. So lots of premieres going on here. A song called Blaze. And really the song is about how we have a short time here in our lifetime to make a mark. And Trevor has been helping me realise the feel of this song, Blaze.
Dare I see the sun's white heat, unbraided sun holds chemistry. Her infinite eyes pierce the sky, and burning beats silver streams on high. Blaze, shine. We live our lives out like shooting stars, the sovereign flames of joy of all. Dare I heal death's bold flutes, heralded like love's naked star, bone truth. Miles of sparks from Calvary cross, every splintered orbs pulls apart the dark. We blaze, we shine, and live our lives out like shooting stars, the sovereign flames of who we are. Be brave.
That's a new song that we're working on called Blaze. I'm not playing you the whole songs because you can understand they're all actually brand new and we're piecing them together and hopefully teasing you for the future. Amazing. Trevor scored all that out and was the great thing about working with Trevor is he comes across and I plan my new ideas and I tell him the theme of the lyrics and he goes away and thinks about it and then sends me ideas and concepts. But the brilliant thing is Trevor sees the whole picture, and for a songwriter, that's amazing. Well, this is a question I really want to ask you is, I'm a songwriter, so you're thinking about the song. When did you as a drummer think that it was, because I played in loads of bands where the drummer's just like, if I want to really dominate here and be louder and make more noise and show off. When did it hit you that you thought the song was so important? I didn't mean to ask you such a tough question.
No.
You seem to have got
not.
stunned.
It's like I had this epiphany that a few years ago.
You had a girl called Tiffany?
No. That was someone else.
Okay.
Yeah. No, not Tiffany. But I had an epiphany.
Okay.
I had an awakening.
A religious experience.
Yeah, if you like. Yes,
okay.
It was an experience anyway.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And I realised that when a drummer plays a drum fill, you've got to think: am I playing this drum fill for me, as in ego, because I want to show my chops off, or am I playing this fill for the song? Does this song need this fill? And I mean, can I get away with something a lot simpler, or does it actually even need a fill? I mean, you figure that a fill is something that takes section A into section B. You're going from a verse to a chorus, or chorus to a verse. Mm-hmm. Okay? And it doesn't need to be some big announcement. It's something that helps one section move into another. Yeah. And so making that, or finding that realization in playing, helped me play much more for the song. So it was a case of taking it out, taking stuff away.
That's great.
Minimalist.
Yeah. That's I've wanted to know how you saw that, because so many drummers aren't that way. And when you're, as a producer, you're almost sort of saying, have you listened to the song here? This is a chorus, this is a bridge. And actually, with Trevor working on my new album and these other songs we're working on, it was a revelation to me how much Trevor really, 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 really did think about the songs, more than I ever perceived. And it's usually a month after you're playing the song, you suddenly get so in love with what the drum parts are. Because as a songwriter, you said, that's another hook. That is a hook. And some of those drummers I've always loved seem to do hooks on those great records. Right. Even with Black Sabbath, you'd hear, and Deep Purple, they become hooks in their self, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah.
This is people be interested in the Q-Phil thing because it's my show. What was it like? Because you've mentioned this before. When me and Brian were working in 9 Ockenden Road in Islington in a little flat, we didn't have drums, right? But we had ideas, and we'd bring you up to our flat to try to portray what we wanted a real human drummer to do. Right.
Well, before you had a drum machine, and you got the little Roland 808, which to this day is still an amazing machine.
Yeah.
So they didn't have a drum machine, so they'd play the drums with their mouths. So, you
mean me and Brian, right?
Brian, it would be... They record that.
I like it. And you're hitting it. I'm hitting my leg.
Yeah. Try and hit it in time, though, if you can.
Okay.
All right. But they would play the drum parts, and I mean, it sounded really good. And then they play the bass and the guitars and sing over the top of it, and they were really cool, like 4-track demos.
Well, I have a little surprise for everybody here, and probably for you, Trev. You probably haven't heard this for over 130 years, something like that. This is a 4-track demo that we wrote at the beginning of the Q-Phil days. 4-track demo called Shock the Body to Life. And this is the kind of thing that we gave to Trevor and said, study this. Poor bugger had to study this and then think, how can I put this onto a real live drum kit? So this is made in the Islington flat right back at the beginning of the 80s, a 4-track demo of Shock the Body to Life.
Stranger than fiction, the way
I can't help but laugh. That's a 4-track demo from the beginning of time. In fact, funny story about that song, Shock the Body to Life. We, Q-Phil, had a song coming out called Go For It. And we wanted it not to be Go For It. We wanted it to be Heroes Never Die. But when we played all our demos to Clive Davis, the head of Arista Records, he said, this song, Shock the Body to Life, that should be your next single. Well, we totally ignored him. That was the kind of thing we did in those days. And we put Heroes Never Die out. But that's the kind of demo that our Trevor had to put up with, and it came to my flat to study. Can you believe it? That's what we used to give to Trevor and say, listen to all this. We'd say, play that.
Yeah.
Play that.
And so I'd interpret that. And then we'd get into the studio, and then I'd get to the microphone and go... They say, no, we want it on the kit.
And then at the end of the session, when he left, we'd go back to that.
Yeah, let's just keep it with our mouths, shall we?
But don't tell him. It would upset his soul. I gotta. So that's we've been unified, as a threesome, really. Even though we've all done different things, all up to this point. We were just 20 minutes ago talking to Brian.
We were indeed
in England on Skype, and I still find this really, really, really quite amazing that the nucleus of 3 players that started back in when did we really meet up in London?
Wow.
Are we talking? Late 70s, right?
Late 70s, early 80s, yeah.
And here we are, very, very old.
And then we all live 5 minutes from one another.
Yes, and even though we might be wearing glasses and you're in a straitjacket and you were wheeled in by a nurse.
I was dragged in a straitjacket. What are you on about?
Well, that's what happened. When
the thing is, what you got to understand is I totally didn't agree to this. I was press ganged. I was,
Let's time down again. Time down. We'll just use the first part of this. Hey, I gotta jump back here again about this writing music and everything. When Q-Phil were recording in Battery in London and Willesden, Mutt Lange, that famous producer for so many hits, was working on Def Leppard. Now, the Q-Phil album, which I know you all worship out there, all 3 of you, we were forced by our record company to use a Fairlight machine, which is like the first of a sampling machine. Even though we'd done Dancing in Heaven with Trevor live, we wanted to keep drums live. We fought very hard for the next single, Heroes Never Die. We wanted Trevor to play drums on that as well. But we sort of had to succumb to using this Fairlight.
And it was the prototype.
Yes, so we went to a studio, I think,
John Conger's studio.
Oh, thank you, Trevor.
Yeah.
John Conger, South African guy. He had this first machine, right?
Yeah, it was the prototype Fairlight, yeah.
Now, all I'm thinking about is the song, so I'm not really concentrating, but our keyboard player, Chris Richardson, he read music, and he was very musical, and like Trevor, he wrote music down. Me and Brian, we were the savages. We just made noises, but Trevor and Chris were really the ones that would take our ideas and develop them. So Trevor, I remember programming and getting involved in the programming of some of the songs on Q-Phil. Now this, by doing that and reading music, and which our keyboard player understood as well, led, I believe, you on to work with Def Leppard, right?
Well, that's right, because I was like the in-house session drummer as we were the band.
Yep.
For Zomba, which to start with,
Jive Records, yeah.
Which then led on to Jive Records.
Oh yeah, yep.
Right, and we were the in-house band. So because I did all that kind of work with Q-Phil, I had that knowledge, and what they were doing, what Mutt Lange was doing with Def Leppard, is it was a revolutionary idea that he wanted to take that music and program it into a computer called a Fairlight. But no one had ever done this before.
That's right.
And what they needed to do was have someone come and transcribe all the drum parts out from a rehearsal tape of the Pyromania album. So it was the whole album.
Now, was it the drummer? Had he had the accident?
No. I actually shook that hand. The one that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Ricky Allen. Yeah.
Who lost it in a car crash?
That's right. Yeah. So what we had to do was I transcribed the whole album, the drum parts, and then we had to find a way to turn it into like a computer code to program it into the Fairlight. Now, so we called them the midnight sessions. I'd get over there at midnight.
Oh, good God.
And it would be...
was this because it was,
It was downtime at the things, and they were working on programming the drums into a Linn drum machine to start with.
Oh, so first it was into a Linn.
Yeah,
Linn
first
drum.
of all they put it into a Linn, and then we, converted it over the drum charts, and we put like 2s and 1s, so we knew where we could put the beats into the actual computer to find a way to program it in.
This is so intricate.
Yeah, and it was, and I didn't quite understand to start with, and so there'd be Mutt Lange.
Well, that's understandable because you're a drummer, right?
Right,
it's not easy to sort of lock into life, right?
Not really. No. Don't talk to me about life. And so Mutt Lange, Mike Shipley, and myself would be in the studio, and from time to time, like Ricky Allen had come in and see what was going on, and he asked about.
And he was quite into it.
No
problem.
But no one truly really understood what was going on.
I see.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when it came to time to going to John Conger's place and working with the Fairlight, it was like, well, I'm not quite sure they've got a keyboard.
So they took you on to the next stage.
Next stage of programming it. And so then they play the keyboard, and they had, like, each keyboard note would represent a different drum.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, I understand. And so what we did, and it took about a month, we programmed all the drum parts.
Was it you actually playing it into the machine, hitting the notes down?
No, we didn't really need to.
Wow.
It was like on a computer screen. We just put the notes in.
Okay.
And then it was the strangest thing. When they pressed play, I mean, you'd hear these drum parts come back, but there was no cymbals. It was just kick, drum, toms, and snare.
And I read, I've recently been speaking to the engineer, Nigel Green, great friend of ours, who did the Q-Phil record, survived the Q-Phil, went on to Def Leppard and probably didn't survive. But he was saying that a lot of the demos they do, even for everything that Mutt does, it's snare and kick, and they look at guitars and cymbals later.
Right.
Interesting.
So we programmed it all in, and then when all the drums were done, Ricky went back in and put live cymbals over the top.
Oh, okay.
But when we heard back just the drum parts, it just sounded so weird. It sounded so stiff and rigid.
Right.
And obviously it was in perfect time.
Yeah.
But when Ricky put the cymbals on it, it sounded like a drummer playing.
Well, we're talking about all this perfect time and programming and hitting keyboards. Let's listen to you, Trev, actually doing the real thing, live playing, which is what it's all about, really, isn't it? Trevor's been playing on a very, very experimental track of mine called The Buddha of Frankfurt. That's about a philosopher that I have great respect for, and Arthur Schopenhauer. It's purely instrumental, but it really shows how Trevor just takes this thing and expands it. See if you can work out all the different time signatures. I told Trevor just to do his thing on a basic backing track, and I'm going to come back later and construct on top of it. But you're very clever if you can work out all the different timings that Trevor plays on this track. Okay, we'll go back to Def Leppard in a moment. Trevor letting go on an experimental track we're building on called The Buddha of Frankfurt, and you'll hear Trevor counting the bars at the end. That's for me, so that I understand what I'm dealing with. You'll hear him on the end trying to say, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5, this is 6. Yes, he has to educate me on what bars are. But my God, did you hear the kick drum? That's for all you musos out there, all you up-and-coming drummers. My God, when Trevor lets loose, the world moves. Well, let's go back to the incredible story of Pyromania and Def Leppard, because Trevor was involved right at the very birth of this iconic, huge album. Now, this is an interesting question. What was it like to work with the mysterious Mutt Lange?
At the time, he was fine, because we were all discovering something together.
Yeah.
We were doing something no one had ever done before.
How long did it take to do all this? I mean, this is a Pyromania record.
This was the Pyromania album. Yeah, I think that went on to sell quite a few copies.
I mean, it's become a megalithic kind of iconic, huge mountain of a record. I think it started with you.
I'm giving you a bit of a scoop now, because no one actually knows this. So
okay, hang on a minute. Everybody get ready. You only get this on Radio OwlsNest. This is a scoop from the great Trevor Thornton.
Right. So I'm transcribing Ricky Allen's drum parts. Every time I got to a feel I didn't like, I put one of my own in.
I like it. I really, really like that. That is a hell of a scoop. And he's revealing it to you because the authorities cannot get him at this point.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
So why didn't Matt or anybody else realise what you were doing?
Because we were programming in, and when we listened back to it...
man.
Yeah.
You should have had a credit on that record.
I always wish I had. I mean,
you should. Damn me, you should have had a credit anyway for being there at post-production.
Well,
but they don't. It's interesting because even Nigel says there's a lot of things where the stories won't really be told about this record.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably don't like the idea that no one actually played on it. Yeah. Because it was all done on a computer. Yeah, I think that was probably the first album, because that was the forerunner to Cubase and Steinberg and all those.
Yes, that's right. So anyway, jumping on there, you really should have got a credit for Def Leppard.
Unfortunately, I didn't. I did actually mention, because it was Mutt Lange, and I realised he was
a big deal.
He was a big producer, so this was going to be a big album.
Yeah.
It was like, I would really appreciate a credit on this, and it was all like, yeah, no problem. Of course, the album comes out, my name's nowhere. So
yeah. I know that's like it was for all musicians when we first came into town. Now, I want to ask you, because Trev, you teach people, right?
I do teach.
So, for any of you out there that want to be a drummer, or you've got a child who wants to be a drummer, anybody wants to beat anything down and to make a noise, you should contact Trevor Thornton. Now, it's not really advertised; it's just word of mouth, right?
It's word of mouth, or mouth and foot, yeah.
But you are doing lessons, and so it could, people that are interested should contact you.
It's
right?
possible, yeah.
Okay, good. I haven't upset you with that, right?
I have a very small opening.
I don't know how to follow that. I had heard rumours, but I really didn't know how to follow that. We'll leave that there.
Yeah.
What a way to finish. There, I think we'll put some echo on that and just let's go out. I have a very small opening. How can you really follow that? Well, let's follow it with some more music. Trevor's just played some amazing drums on an arrangement of a song I'm working on that's called You Are My Home, and that's what we're going to listen to now. That's a song that I'm working on now. Trevor has just laid down some quite exceptional drums on that track, and still working on it, still writing lyrics, but you can hear how Trevor is helping me develop it. That song is called You Are My Home. So tell me, Trev, before we go here, what have you been doing recently with Mr. Page?
Oh,
that's me, by the way.
I've been playing on a lot of your songs.
That's right.
Probably a couple of years ago now, I set myself up with Martin's help and a few of our friends, set up my own home studio. And
that's a great studio.
Yeah, we got it all tweaked out. Kit sounds great. Thanks also a shout out to Bobby Summerfield for his help.
Mike Rodriguez. Yeah.
Mike Rodriguez.
Yeah.
And so I've set myself up a very nice Pro Tools studio, so it's all tweaked out. And so I have recorded a lot of Martin's latest material, although one album we actually did over at Bobby Summerfield's.
Yeah, which we're still working on, which is pretty exceptional.
Right.
Yeah.
And which is sounding amazing. I mean, what you've done with the drums, they do sound incredible.
Now, Trev's been playing on a lot of my material, and actually, in a way, 3 whole albums we've got in the can, haven't we?
Right, yeah.
It's been just a fantastic re-collaboration, really. I still think it's pretty amazing that we're sat here in a room in California, and yet we started all those days ago, and still having a giggle, aren't we?
We certainly are.
Well, I hope you come back again, Trev, because I enjoyed that, and maybe we can talk about some other things besides you having a small opening. So it just remains for me to say, Trev, cheers.
Oh,
cheers,
nice.
Trev.
Cheers, Martin.
And thank you, Trevor, for dropping in at Radio OwlsNest and being my co-host and keeping me honest. Well, reasonably honest. I just want to remind you that you can pick up all my solo albums on CD Baby and iTunes and Amazon and Google, and I'm sure millions of other places, because they sprout up all the time, don't they? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the show today with Trevor Thornton, my drummer from all the years back and actually to this very day, and both of us are going to say goodbye to you from the Owl's Nest until we see you again. Thank you again, Mr. Trevor Thornton.
Thank you, Martin. It's been a pleasure.
And I will see all you owl heads next time in the Owl's Nest.